Would everyone please rise for the playing of taps? This is a national tradition now. We start the program across the nation at 11 o'clock with the playing of taps. Please take your seats. That beautiful rendition of taps was performed by Nan LaCourte, who is the ship's bugler. And she does a fantastic job. She's a volunteer, comes all the way from Cape May Courthouse, and has been a part of the ship's crew for many, many years. So how about a nice round of applause for Nan? Actually, a little brief note about the ship's buglers. The Battleship New Jersey was the last battleship in the 1960s when she was off the coast of Vietnam to have a bugler assigned to ship's company. And we actually had that bugler on board a few times. He lives out in California, and the tradition is still carried on by Nan today. So trying to keep the legacy alive on the world's greatest battleship. Today, of course, we're here to honor our veterans, those that served in peace and those that served in war. I understand from Phil, who did some research on the subject, we've had over 20 million Americans since the revolutionary days who have served our nation in uniform, both men and women. So today we're here to honor them. It wasn't always known as Veterans Day. In fact, on the one-year anniversary of the ending of World War I, on November 11th, 1919, Woodrow Wilson recognized the service of those Americans who fought in the war and thought it was right that we honor them by having a special day set aside to represent their sacrifice. It wasn't until 1954 that the name was actually officially changed by the Congress from Armistice Day to Veterans Day. And at that time, President Dwight D. Eisenhower proclaimed the Veterans Day would always be officially observed on November 11th at 11 o'clock when the armistice was officially signed at the end of World War I. We're fortunate today to have with us some exceptionally talented people who will be offering remarks as we celebrate the selfless service of those who served in uniform. One of our, shall we say, senior citizen type sailors who is still serving on board the battleship in his 90s, comes to work often, and we're very happy to see him. He brings a lot of joy and a lot of levity to the ship with his off-the-wall remarks and comments, which sometimes are not always politically correct, but we love him anyway. So on that note, I would like to introduce John Quinessa, Sr., who was a veteran serving in World War II, not on this ship, but on a ship that was involved with the very ending of World War II, and he'll tell you about some of that experience. So John, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Captain, for those not so kind remarks. Anyway, good morning, everyone. I want to thank Jack for giving me the honor and privilege to speak today, honoring all our veterans, both living and deceased. I was told to keep it short. I'm usually up here for a good hour, but Jack says, keep it short, John. So I'm having a little voice problem too, so I will keep it short. I'm going to begin by saying I served in the Navy as a young teenager during World War II, from the early 1944 through the end of 1946. I served in the amphibious fleet in the Asiatic Pacific as a radio operator, a radio man second class, aboard an LSM. For you that don't know what an LSM is, it's a landing ship medium. Our job was shuttling troops, tanks, airplane fuel, and other supplies to the various islands. It was quite a bumpy ride. They were flat-bottom ships, especially during rough seas. Many seasick sailors. Fortunately, I was not one of them. While servicing these islands and bringing supplies and so forth to them after they were taken by our troops, I could see the devastation that was dealt in war, especially by the offshore bombardment, like ships such as the Big J and others. It gave me an idea of what our young men must have went through when they hit those beaches. And now for a magical moment in my career. While off the shore of Guam, waiting for the invasion of Japan, sometime in August of 1945, while I was on duty in the Radio Shack, I took the message stating that the Japanese had surrendered. I'm sure you heard me tell this story before, so I won't go into great detail about it, but it's something that lives in my memory, and I'll cherish that for life. And a not too magical moment in my life, Captain's Mast. You've all heard of Captain's Mast. I was playing a practical joke on the signalman on the conning tower while in convoy at sea in enemy waters. It was a joke that turned out to be very devastating. It led me to be quarantined on the ship for the rest of my stay. A long story that was too sad to tell. I always end my talks by saying this. I entered the Navy as a brash young teenager, and I came out as a mature, grown-up young man. Thank you for listening, and God bless you and all our veterans, and God bless America.
Thank you, Johnny Q. Probably the shortest speech I've ever heard you say.
Still fresh.
That's a great conversation piece, by the way, about the time you got quarantined. I'm glad you didn't share that with us today. You might have given some people the wrong idea about your background. On a more serious note, this year we've obviously experienced tremendous sacrifice dealing with this COVID-19. And at the same time, we've also lost several very, very important people, which we would like now to recognize. First, Pam, would you join me, please? Assemblywoman Blambett. Put this on. Getting used to wearing this mask is another challenge. Quite haven't adjusted yet. I'm working on it. Ted Gallagher, who serves on the board of directors with us on the Battleship, was going to be here, but unfortunately he could not make it due to the quarantine restrictions that all of us are having to deal with right now. But his remarks would have been, and I'm going to read verbatim what he would have been saying had he been here. I would like to recognize the contributions of a very patriotic individual, Command Sergeant Major Gordon C. Lampett, father-in-law of Assemblywoman Pam, and the father of Chuck. Command Sergeant Major Lampett died this past July, and what I have learned from some things I read plus his obituary and other sources, the CSM Lampett was a very proud member of the U.S. Army, and that pride was shown with his accomplishments during his career and 28 years of service. He was a native of Browns Mills, New Jersey, and again, as I mentioned, he died this past July. Native of the Bronx, served in the Army from 1958 until he retired 28 years later. He was a decorated Army veteran of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, having served 3 tours in World War II, 3 tours in Korea, and 2 tours in Vietnam. Just a phenomenal service record. That is a total of 8 combat tours, far and above what many other service members perform. Just an example of his dedication, which he brought to the service, and a patriotism to this great country. He was a member of the Browns Mills Memorial VFW Hall 6805. And of course, those of you who know, Command Sergeant Major is about as high as you can get in the enlisted ranks. So to his great service record and accomplishments, we would like to just say thank you to the family members for allowing us to recognize your father-in-law's tremendous service to this great country. Pam, would you please?
As an assemblywoman now for about 15 years, I've attended many Veterans Day events, and I spend my time, my few minutes at the podium, thanking the veterans for their service during wartime, during peace. I thank the families for, giving up their loved one to be able to go and to serve, to keep our country safe. And today I do the same. I thank each and every one of you for your service, your commitment, your undying love of our country. But this year is different. This year, my family who are here, my husband Chuck, my daughter Eileen, her husband Jeremy, my sister-in-law Susan, her husband Michael, my brother-in-law Philip, his wife Krista, and daughter Kelsey. There are a few members of the family missing who are maybe watching today. In January, we lost my mother-in-law. She had suffered for a while, and she went peacefully with all of us by her side. Having just celebrated nearly over 71 years of marriage to my father-in-law. The stories that they would tell about how they met, the stories that they would share with us are ones that we treasure. And then COVID hit. And my father-in-law was in a place where obviously we couldn't get to him. We tried with FaceTime, we tried with window visits, we tried. My father-in-law passed away. I didn't grow up in an Army family or a military family. I really didn't know what it was about. My husband and I just celebrated 37 years of marriage, so I've been married to this family for over 40 years. And I can tell you that this is a tight-knit family, just like many military families. This is a tight-knit family. There were 7 of them in one bathroom, but they had to really figure it out. There were many times where food had to be shared in a way that, everybody got some, but not all. The sacrifices that they had without having their father, many, many years. They spent a little time in Okinawa, they came back, but really they resided right down the street from Fort Dix. Not only did my father-in-law serve for 28 years in the military, but when he retired, he went back to work for the military as a civilian. This was a man who we call our hero, your hero. We miss him. We miss him greatly. And to you know, the Lampett family, you've taught me a lot about what it means to have a large family and a large military family, which many of you who are on this ship today can appreciate. I thank the Battleship for acknowledging my father-in-law and the commitment not only from him in his time at war, well-decorated, a well-decorated man, honorable man. And I appreciate the Battleship and your acknowledgement of my father-in-law. So thank you all.
In recognition of your father-in-law's wonderful career and service, we would like to offer the family the flag that's flown over the battleship with a proclamation acknowledging when it was flown. So we would like you to have this as a token of our appreciation. Thank you.
Very much.
Battleship is composed of full-time staff and part-time staff and a litany of volunteers who have contributed so much of their time and efforts to keeping this ship a viable and meaningful resource for generations to come on board and learn and experience what Navy life would have been like. This past week we lost one of our volunteers, Bill O'Neill, who was a tremendous asset to the ship, like so many other volunteers. And we would also like Bob Catando to please come up and offer a few words on behalf of Bill. Bob and Bill were great friends, served together for many years on this ship. So please welcome Bob Catando.
Just asked a good captain whether I could take my mask off, and he said yes. So the mask is coming off. Bill O'Neill, that many of you know, died very suddenly last week. He died of a heart attack. And no one knew, even his beloved sister, that he had a bad heart, because he was actually taking medicine and radiation for some cancer that was growing on his thigh. And I usually called him every Tuesday asking him to go out for breakfast, but he rarely answered his phone. He didn't like to answer phones, and he never owned a computer. And he died at 83. But I want to tell you a little bit about Bill. You'll appreciate it, and the work that he did on the ship, and some other interesting things. I won't take very long. But Bill was born and raised in Gloucester, lived there his entire life, lived in the same home that he was raised by his mother and father. And he was 83 years old when he died this past Thursday last, and was just a lovable, kind tour guide that I've ever met. In all the years that I knew him, which was 16, I've been here for 20, I never heard even a swear word out of his mouth. He loved everybody, and he just did his job two ways. He liked the captain's quarters, the captain's cabin, topside, and he liked to do encampments. But as time went on, the encampments where we had children coming in from Friday night to Saturday morning, or Saturday night to Sunday morning, his legs started getting very bad, and he asked whether he could just do the captain's quarter or the captain's cabin, and that was granted, and he did that for many years. He just loved it, loved going there and talking about the captain and where he lived and where he bedded and all the things that happened. Now, Bill O'Neill was a graduate of Gloucester Catholic High School just down the road. Many of you, if you're local, would know that. He graduated from Villanova in 1958 as a history major, and if you asked him questions on military history, he probably knew the answer. He was just adept at that, just really completely. Excuse me. After that, he joined the Marines for 4 years active, and then several years in the reserves. And then from there, he worked for the County Board of Welfare. and he retired from that. I believe he served about 25 years. So he had a stellar record with the high school and doing these things. I wanted to talk about the high school for a minute because you won't believe this. Last year, Bill was given an award by Gloucester County Athletic Director and basketball for his dedication to the high school basketball team. He did it for 60 years. That's really hard to believe, but he did. And he went to almost every single solitary home game after he got out of the Marines, he tells me, and he followed them. And he would sit on the first bench, and in front of him, he would have a blanket on his legs, and he had a visitor, his dog, Shamrock. I don't know if he paid for 2 tickets or whether the dog got a biscuit. I have no idea. I'm even surprised they allowed him to bring the dog in, but they did. And for all these years, of course, Shamrock only lasted 13, but all these years, he had an animal on his lap. And the other thing that he did, you talk about charity, is every year when the season was over, he took them out to dinner. That's a lot of dinners if it were 60 years. And they would go to the Gateway Diner in Westville, and when they got tired of doing that year after year, especially him, he went to a Chinese restaurant in Glassboro. And every year they clapped, they thanked him. And someone said, well, why do you always like girls so much? It's not what you think. He liked girls, he said, because first of all, they weren't as egotistical as men. Their scores were lower, so that many times the basketball games ended, even though they had the same time span, they ended quicker because the scores were pretty low, and then the whistle, went off for the next quarter. And the other thing he loved about him was that they always thanked him for being there. And he said it was rare that boys would do the same thing. Now let's just talk about the ship. The ship was his second love. His first love was his sister. Her name was Mary Pat, and is Mary Pat. But she lived out in Indiana for years and years until her husband died. She had 5 children. So he has a big family. That was his only sibling, and she came back to Gloucester in 2017 and pretty much took care of him, although it was hard to take care of a man who lived by himself for all these years and slept on a sleeping bag on his bed. Never, ever went under the sheets, he tells me. It's crazy. He always slept in a sleeping bag. I said, well, did you wash it? And he said, yeah, on occasion I even washed it, which is nice. I'm glad he did that. And anyway, so he was by himself, and he went to the battleship after all these other things. Even when he had the responsibility of the Gloucester County or the Gloucester Catholic basketball, he did the same thing with the girls softball, except for the dinners, because there would have been so many more. And incidentally, I do want to tell you, I do not think there's a person here from the O'Neill family, and that is because, and I'm going to tell you about this flag, that is because his viewing and the Mass is going on right now. It's coincidental. We had this planned. It's Veterans Day. It's always November 11th, and they had difficulty with the funeral home and all, trying to get the same or a different date. So they're there, and they have a flag that the church has given, which is on the coffin, and I have the flag that Jack and the crew kindly flew last Saturday in honor and memory of Bill O'Neill. And they do this for all those who are deceased, and I will give this to the family tomorrow. And Mary said that she would do a small ceremony and then decide what to do with that flag. So I appreciate Jack for giving it to me now so I don't forget. So anyway, so he was on a battleship, and he was a tour guide for a while, as many of us here are still. And by the way, someone said, is that a war wound with my cane? No, I had back surgery, so nothing to do with Purple Hearts or anything like that, just in case you think so. But anyway, so he came to the battleship, and over time, as he was doing tours, his legs got bad, and he decided he would like to do the captain's cabin. And I guess he asked the administrators and a fellow named Mike Chase, who did the scheduling, and he was able to do that for many years. He just loved it so much. And the other thing that Bill loved to do were the encampments at night. And this would be Friday night to Saturday, where we got a big group of kids normally, or Saturday night to Sunday. And he used to do one of those once a week. And then it got too much for him, and he just decided to do the captain's quarter, which he did. But he had a couple of loves in between there that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Mary Pat, his beloved sister, was his first love. He never married. He just was usually by himself. But when she came back in particular and took care of him, he just loved everything about her. Sibling rivalry when they were younger, but as you guys and girls know, that ended as we got older. And there were other things that he loved. He loved the battleship. That was his second love. That's why the battleships are called she. Had the thing been human, he would have married it. I don't think there's any question about it, but he was not married ever. And he was having a time of his life because he had the time to work on the battleship. His third love was the Chesapeake Bay. Now, Bill was a loner, and he was always by himself, but he had a small 25-foot boat down on the, I think it's called the Northeast River. And he would go out into the Delaware Canal there and just boat all day long. And his fourth love was his motorcycle. Now, his motorcycle was old. It reminded me when I saw him on it of General Pat in World War II with an old olive drab rusty motorcycle. I mean, it was old, shabby. He told me it went about 50 to 55 miles an hour, but he rode that all the time. So I wanted to tell you that they were his four loves. Now, the ship also gave him a plaque. I wanted to tell you that just quickly, and then we'll end this. And that was a plaque for being Volunteer of the Year, and that was this year. He was given that plaque just recently, so he has two nice plaques. And he was just a kind, great man. And he was a little fella. He was probably 5'4", and I said, well, how'd you get in the Marines? And he said he lied about his height. I said, you did? And how was that? He said, well, I told him I was 5'10", which they didn't believe, of course. But he loved the Marines. And in all of my years, I never heard a bad word out of his mouth. He loved everyone on this ship, female, male, bosses, non-bosses, custodians. He just was a beloved man. I loved him dearly, and I'm going to miss him. And I say to you, may his soul rest in peace and eternity. And as the Navy would say, fair winds and following sea. God bless Bill O'Neill. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for that testimony on Bill O'Neill. I'm sure he was listening in and loved every word of it. Bear with me, I'm trying to manage this paperwork with all the wind that we're dealing with right now. Another Marine who recently passed was Colonel Rodney Walton. His family could not be here for this because unfortunately today is his funeral. But Colonel Walton was a graduate from PMC, Pennsylvania Military College, now Widener University. He landed on the beach in Beirut in 1958 as part of a regimental combat team. He also went on to command leadership school for the Marines and the naval officers and NCOs. And much of the time as a full-time reservist was no pay. He just did it purely unselfishly for Corps and country. He was a leader, a motivator, a great storyteller, a proud Eagle Scout, and a friend of the USS New Jersey, a great supporter. So we offer his wife, Carol, and family our condolences on this very sad occasion. Battleship New Jersey was a very lucky ship. In all the wars that she fought in, she only lost one sailor to combat action. That was Seaman Robert Oesterwind, who was killed on May 21st, 1951, when the Battleship New Jersey was providing naval gunfire support off of Wonsan Harbor off the coast of Korea. With us today, we're honored to have his great nephew, Jacob Oesterwind, who flew in from Los Angeles. He because we're going to be honoring his namesake with a plaque. That I would like to invite Ryan Cisnansky, our curator, to come forward and present the plaque. And Jacob, would you please come up?
Would you like to see the plaque or the sign first?
Sign.
Sign. Would you help me unveil it?
Battleship New Jersey was one of a number of naval vessels that provided gunfire support to Marine and Army troops ashore during the Korean War. New Jersey had just gotten into Korean waters on May 20th, 1951, where she relieved the battleship Missouri. She was off the port of Wonsan overnight, and when the sun came up on the morning of May 21st, a North Korean shore battery which had not previously been seen because of the darkness, was able to emerge from a cave and fire a number of 6-inch projectiles at the battleship. Those projectiles could do no damage to the ship itself. However, for sailors on deck, such as Robert Oesterwind, who manned a 40mm gun tub, the one that used to be right there where some of you are sitting, the circle on the deck there, they were still vulnerable. So when the ship took a hit right on turret 1 behind us, the turret's armor, 17 inches thick, stopped the shell, but the shrapnel created caught a number of sailors which were heading to that gun tub, including Robert Oesterwind. 3 sailors made it into the wardroom with their wounds, where they were treated at the battle dressing station there, but Seaman Oesterwind did not make it, and the shrapnel to his chest proved fatal. After that, the battleship opened fire and was able to destroy the Korean gun battery and did not take another hit for the rest of the war.
This is such an incredible honor. I want to thank everyone for coming out and supporting today, despite the windy weather. I also want to thank all the members who spend their time day in and day out to help keep the integrity of the ship alive. Not only are they keeping American history alive, but they are also informing future generations of why a ship of this magnitude was built, to serve and protect. It is an incredible honor to be able to speak today on behalf of my family. Like they said, my name is Jacob Oesterwind. I am the great nephew of Robert Herman Oesterwind. Robert was the only sailor to be killed on the battleship on May 21st, 1951. And I never got an opportunity to meet my great uncle. And this is something that I share with many across our country. But in the fall of 2008, I was able to come on board the ship along with my grandfather, which was Robert's brother, my dad and my uncle, and we were able to discover the journey that Robert had as a seaman. And we were able to be taken to the ladder where he was climbing up when a piece of shrapnel hit his back. And we even got to meet the sailor, which my great uncle fell to, and who dragged him to the medical bay. The opportunity to see my grandfather witness the truth of my great uncle, the truth that he was a hero, like many of those who serve in this country, was a gift that I will cherish for the rest of my life. That seemed like forever ago. And yet here we are 12 years later, facing the most challenging time in American history, COVID-19. A public health crisis that has infected more than 10 million people and is reaching far beyond our borders. An economic crisis that is bound to hit more than a million Americans, with debt to go up and small businesses to go under. And a social justice crisis where people of color are fighting for the equal rights and opportunities of their fellow Americans. In the midst of this uncertainty, it is days like today that remind me what it means to be an American. It gives me hope and it gives me faith. Veterans Day is a day where we honor all of those who have served this country. And it is also a reminder of the importance of unity. It is our job as American citizens to remind those who are fighting why they are fighting. To not let our fallen soldiers die in vain. And whether you are black or white, gay or straight, man or woman, Republican or Democrat, we must come together. And we must do better. I want to end today with a quote from Herbert Hoover, the 31st President of the United States. Hoover took office on March 5th, 1921, and 6 months later, the Great Depression hit. His words follow. While the crash only took place 6 months ago, I am convinced that the worst has passed. And with the continued unity and effort, we shall rapidly overcome. This is one certainty of the future, of the people, of the resources, intelligence, and character of the people of the United States. That is prosperity. Thank you to the men and women who put on a uniform each and every day to protect the rights and freedoms of the American people. Thank you to those who have lost their lives to protect those rights and freedoms. Thank you to those who have served on the USS New Jersey. And thank you, Robert Oesterwind. God bless you all, and God bless these United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob, for those incredible words. Coming from a 23-year-old, there's certainly hope for your generation. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time from your busy schedule. Should mention Jacob is an actor and is going to be in NCIS. So if you watch that show on Sunday evenings, you might see Jacob there. So before he leaves and before you leave, you might want to get his autograph before he becomes rich and famous. Finally on our program, but certainly not the least, we would like to introduce Assemblyman Bill Spearman, New Jersey Assembly 5th District, who has graciously been here today to offer some comments. And Bill, would you please?
Good afternoon. I am proud and honored to be here today. I thought about writing a speech or something, and I decided to just come and enjoy being in your presence. I've served in the public sector, in government, and in private, nonprofits, serving the community all my life. And I am in awe of you, the veterans, for what you've done for this country. Many of you, some of you, have given the ultimate sacrifice of your lives. Many of you have served for many, many years. You've served in the military, and you've come back and served again. Keeping this battleship alive, keeping other institutions like it alive, so that young people can see and experience this beautiful ship. I still remember when Pat Jones was working on bringing it to Camden and the effort she went through and how honored I was when it came here. And to see it still here today, still being a beacon for those who want to serve in the future. It just makes me proud to be able to be here to share this with you today. And as my young friend said earlier, it's especially poignant during these troubled times. Whether it's people abroad who want to do us harm, or whether it's dissension at home with people who disagree. It's because of you, the veterans, that we even have the opportunity to have those disagreements. It's because of you that we have this freedom. It's because of you that my kids and my grandkids and their kids will be able to have freedom. Thank you all. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for your volunteerism, and continue to serve. And I will continue to, along with my assembly colleague, we will continue to do whatever we can do to support your efforts so that this facility and others like it will continue to be here for our young people of the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bill. We appreciate your support and continued support and look forward to working with you and your team going forward. At this time, we are going to have our wreath presentation to honor the veterans who have given their all for this great country. And I would ask John Q, if you would please, and Chief Jack Stickney to please present the wreath. I would ask the guests to please rise. Following the wreath presentation, we will perform taps. Thank you. Please be seated. Our final speaker today is our Chief Executive Officer and President, Phil Rowan. Phil does a fantastic job keeping the lights burning and the bills paid and maintaining this great battleship. And Phil, I know you've got a lot of things to talk about, so the mic is yours.
Thank you, Captain. Today is Veterans Day, and I'd like all the veterans who are sitting down now, if you can stand up, please stand up. And I want everybody to thank them for their service. I'm not going to be long. I want to thank everybody for coming out today. Obviously, the Battleship New Jersey is a museum and a memorial, and it's it's very important for us to recognize the veterans, those who passed, those that are still alive. We have 1.4 million active duty personnel now serving around the world, and someday they will become veterans. And there's a new crop of recruits coming in every day. I want to mention one thing that I think is part of what we're doing today. The Korean War is known as the Forgotten War, but it's not a forgotten war for folks involved with the battleship. Gordon Lampett, Seaman Oesterwind, there's many people who were involved in the so-called Forgotten War that should never be called that. It was a significant event in the history of the United States. Many people, along with our allies, served in that. And it's actually still not over. There's an armistice, but the war is still raging. And there are people on station right now on that wall to make sure that it does not break into a shooting war. But I think that's something we should be cognizant of right now, that we have enemies around the world. Some people call them opponents or rivals, but they are looking at what we're doing right now. They're well armed. Some of them are larger than us right now in terms of manpower, and they're developing new technologies, and we have to forever stay on guard in moments of turmoil, whether it's a disease, political strife, or economic strife. We have to be cognizant. And having served in the military during the Vietnam War, but our arch rival at the time, we'll use rival, was the Soviet Union. And we had our bombers up in the air 24/7, ready to protect America, and it's still going on today. So I want to thank all the veterans who are here today, the guests that came out today, families and supporters. And I would ask one thing of our legislative delegation. We want to thank you for helping us after we were defunded by the state. I'm not sure why. You went to bat for us and had our funding restored. And I think going forward, we want to continue those conversations of why it is important to keep memorials like the Battleship New Jersey open to people. We can have events, but also primarily educate young people to know what sacrifice people have made, men and women, to keep this country free. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Phil. I'm reminded that we are the land of the free because of the brave. And today is a great day to recognize the selfless sacrifice of the millions of men and women who have served in our armed forces, particularly those that have gave their lives. I know Phil recognized all the vets that are here. Would you all please stand one more time so we can recognize your service to this great country of ours. Being a board member of the trustees, I would also invite the board of trustees that are here today to please stand so we can recognize your contributions to this great battleship. Thank you. And the BB-62 staff, the paid, the unpaid, the volunteers, the people that keep the battleship viable as a beautiful museum and memorial. Our hats are off to you. Continue the great work, and God bless and Godspeed. Now, in closing, I would just like to ask everyone to please stand, and then our bugler is going to perform the Navy hymn. Thank you very much, Dan. Isn't she fantastic? That concludes our ceremony for today. The ship is open for tours. We would just ask everyone to please check in at the guardhouse so you can get your ticket. Free tours for everyone today is available, so please take advantage of the opportunity. I want to thank our weathermen, wherever you are, for keeping the rain at bay. There was some concern about whether or not we were going to be able to do this ceremony outside and maintain our social distancing, so again, we are very fortunate. On that note, have a great day, thank a veteran, and God bless America.